This is Making a Scientist, the podcast by young scientists, for young scientists, and hosted by me, Alex Ainscough. This week, my guest is Dr Faith Uwadiae, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Crick Institute in London. Faith's work investigates the mechanisms that link a rare cancer called Burkitt's lymphoma with malaria. In this episode, hear all about Faith's unconventional path to PhD, her outreach work, and all about her work in diversity in STEM, and how she's become an amateur brewer during lockdown. This was an incredibly enjoyable conversation for me. I honestly wish that I could have heard Faith's advice a lot sooner in my PhD. Hopefully you'll take something really useful away from this podcast. Let's see. Here we go. Dr Faith Uwadiae, thank you very, very much for joining me today on Making a Scientist.
Oh, hi. Nice to see you, Alex.
Yeah. I'd really like to start the interview by asking what research you do. What's the area of research that you work in?
Okay, so I basically work within the field of immunology. So I'm really interested in the immune system and how it actually works during health and disease. And that's what immunology is. It's about researching within that area. The research that I do particularly is actually looking at the immune system response to malaria and how it contributes to a type of cancer called endemic Burkitt's lymphoma. So what I'm doing is trying to understand how malaria is linked to this cancer and what's going on within the immune system that kind of promotes that.
Oh, cool. So how did you get interested in malaria? And well, actually, firstly, how did you get interested in immunology? And then how did that lead into malaria?
Okay, yeah. So I was interested in immunology quite early during my undergraduate degree, actually. So I did an undergraduate degree in biochemistry, essentially. But at the end of my first year of my degree, we had 2 taster lectures within the field of immunology. And I remember just them kind of presenting to us how different cells communicate with each other to kind of educate them about the immune response. And I'm just sitting there going, wow, this sounds really fascinating. I'm going to take like the second year module and then kind of explore it a bit more. And I just fell in love with that second year module, which was the immune system in health and disease. And from that point onwards, I was kind of hooked on, if I'm going to do science, I want it to be immunology. So then I took a third year research project and decided to kind of do my research within immunology, and I was quite fascinated by how the immune system works. So when eventually I got around to doing my master's and PhD, and there was a gap period within that, I knew that...
We'll talk about that later, yeah.
I basically decided that I really wanted to study the immune system. So I did my PhD in asthma, but I specifically focused on T cells and a specific type of T cell called the T follicular helper cell. And basically, I was interested in how those responses work together to produce antibody. And it's those same cells which I'm looking at now, but in malaria. But yeah, the malaria switch was quite unusual because I didn't necessarily expect to work in malaria. I thought I was going to work in asthma or maybe move to autoimmune disease. But I just saw a very interesting job advertised that kind of blew my mind and went, what? Malaria and cancer? Okay, I need to research this.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here.
Oh, that's awesome. So, could you give me a few of the stats, I suppose, behind what the incidence of the it was Burkitt's lymphoma, I think you said. What is the what's the incidence of Burkitt's lymphoma that's caused by malaria? And is Burkitt's lymphoma restricted to malaria? Like if you get malaria?
Yes.
Or can you get it from other?
Burkitt's lymphoma is actually it's quite a rare disease. Overall, but it's not there's 3 different types of Burkitt's lymphoma. So you have a sporadic form, and that's kind of found all around the world, and I think it's about 1 to 2% of lymphomas around the world. You have an immunodeficiency associated type, so you find that in people who are immunocompromised, such as people who have HIV or AIDS. And then you have the endemic form, which is a form that I work on, and that's the form that's actually linked to malaria. And it's quite interesting because although it's linked to malaria, malaria is caused by a type of parasite which is part of a family called the Plasmodium family, and it's only one type of Plasmodium as well, Plasmodium falciparum, that's linked to endemic Burkitt's lymphoma. And it generally only happens in places where that parasite is endemic. So we see this in parts of Africa, generally sub-Saharan Africa, and also in Papua New Guinea. But it's a really rare event, because if you imagine how many people get infected with Plasmodium falciparum, and just such a small proportion of these people go on to get the cancer. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, from what I remember from my A-levels and my undergraduate courses on malaria, so malaria is so it's a parasite, and it likes living on red blood cells, right? So, how does that then go on to cause lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer? So, how does that? What's the link?
That is the question, Alex. What is the link? So, yeah, it's actually really complicated. So, people have known about the link between the malaria and the cancer for more than 50 years, but when it comes to the actual mechanism of what's going on, it's really people don't really know what's going on. I see. Yeah,
okay.
so there's very little that we do know. And also, I didn't really mention it, but there's actually a third part of this. So you also need to be infected with Epstein-Barr virus for this to happen. So if you imagine you need to have the parasite, you must be infected with Epstein-Barr virus, and these two things communicate in some sort of way to cause the cancer.
It's like a perfect storm.
It's a puzzle.
It's like a perfect storm of conditions. Yeah, so, like everything's all coming.
Yeah, it's all over the shop. So what we do know about it is that we think that potentially it's the malaria parasite that's kind of driving a proliferation of the cells. But also, one of the hallmarks of Burkitt's lymphoma, regards to the type of Burkitt's lymphoma that you have, is that there's a translocation event that takes place between MYC, which is normally found on chromosome 8, and the immunoglobulin heavy chain locus, which is kind of important for antibody production. So MYC is really important for cells to proliferate, for them to go into the cell cycle, for example, for them to undergo apoptosis. So it's normally really tightly regulated on chromosome 8. But what happens with this translocation event, it brings it onto chromosome 14 and means that you have mass overexpression of MYC. So we know that happens on basically regards to the type of Burkitt's lymphoma you have. So what people think is that potentially the Plasmodium infection could be triggering that event, maybe. But potentially also the Epstein-Barr virus could be kind of promoting survival, because although MYC is really important for proliferation and cell cycle progression, it also drives apoptosis. So if it was just MYC overexpression, it wouldn't be enough to drive tumour, because the cells would die. So there needs to be an additional survival taking place. And because go.
So, well, which cells is this actually happening?
Oh, sorry, I haven't actually gone into this. Apologies. So this is all happening within the B cells. So it's a B cell cancer.
I see. Okay.
Apologies. I was just getting away.
It makes sense. So I'm just trying to sort of like picture it in my head. So you've got you've got the bloodstream, you've got all of these cells like that going through this tube, which is your blood vessel, right? And then you've got the red blood cells, which everybody knows, they're red and sort of like almost donut-like. And then you've got these malarial parasites that are hitching a ride on the back of these red blood cells. And then it's the B cells that are the ones that are undergoing all of these changes that you saw, the genetic changes and the proliferative changes. So I'm still like, and like you said before, like no one knows what the exact link is. So like between,
because I guess the best way
these,
so the best way to kind of describe it is if you think of the fact that the parasite has a whole specific life cycle. So you get bitten by a mosquito which carries the parasite. Then those parasites kind of go through your bloodstream into your liver, and that's where they start their process. And then they escape and leave the liver, and then they go and infect your red blood cells. So they infect the red blood cells so that they can actually replicate. And then they burst out of your red blood cells. And as they burst out of your red blood cells, this is known as the asexual stage, blood stage. When they're bursting out of your blood cells, that's when you start feeling unwell. You start to feel a bit anemic, you get fever and all those kind of things. But it's your body's reaction to that. So that's the immune response that's happening. And part of that immune response means that you basically get fast proliferation of lots and lots of different types of B cells. So it's thought that it's that immune response that I'm talking about, that the events of the malaria parasite could be activated. And that's what drives that cancer. So the events of the translocation are happening within the B cell that is triggered by the parasites. by the response to the parasite.
So maybe just so that, because I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds scary if you have a parasite inside of you. So what does it actually do in the body, this malarial parasite? It just lives and reproduces, eating off of the red blood cells?
Yeah,
Is that
so
right?
that if you think of it as a part of the bigger, the whole aim of a parasite is to survive and replicate, essentially. So most people don't really know that with malaria, for the parasite to actually complete its life cycle, it needs to bite the same person twice. So yeah.
Oh, I
so if
didn't,
you
I
imagine
didn't know
the
that.
initial,
The same mosquito. Sorry, the same mosquito needs to bite this.
not the same
like different
mosquito, but you need to be bitten twice, essentially.
Okay.
So if you imagine you get bitten, the parasite goes through your liver, escapes out of your liver, infects your red blood cells, and at that point, which I said is the asexual stage. So they're just kind of going through this process where the mosquito is within your red blood cell and goes through multiple stages of parasite development, and then it escapes, and then it can infect another red blood cell. But some of those parasites will then, instead of continuing down that asexual cycle, they'll actually go down the sexual stage and produce sexual parasites known as gametocytes. And these parasites, if you are bitten by a second mosquito, they'll take it up and then they'll undergo sexual reproduction within the mosquito again and go through multiple stages of development within the actual mosquito so that it's ready to another stage of parasite that could bite someone else.
Wow, I had absolutely no idea. Yeah, I just thought it was like you got bit one time and then you had it. Oh, that's crazy. I mean, I do vaguely remember things about like parasites have weird kind of life cycles. Like there's one parasite that, it has to be, it sort of like develops in a cow's intestines and stuff, and then the like things like that. There are all these weird sort of like intermediary steps basically. Like, and I never realized that was the case for malaria. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's
Well,
quite
I mean,
cool.
not if you get it. Not if you get it. I
Not a
guess.
fun disease, I have to admit. I haven't had it, so but from what I've seen, it doesn't look fun.
In terms of malaria, though, so you're working in this in Burkitt's lymphoma, and you mentioned there are all of these different things that can cause Burkitt's lymphoma, and malaria was one of them. But then, and this might be slightly off your topic area here, but what else can malaria do as a side effect? Like if Burkitt's lymphoma is kind of like not a side effect, like a secondary disease to malaria, what other things can malaria induce?
Oh, okay. So you mean, yeah, I guess the main thing is that it can produce severe malaria, which is the one that kids can die of, for example. But then there's a lot of malaria complications. So one of them is cerebral malaria, which is when it gets into your brain, the parasite, and then kids can die from that. But outside of that, I don't know too much, I have to admit. But that's kind of the realm of my knowledge.
Interesting. Okay. So the ultimate aim of the research that you're doing, I suppose, is more to just understand what the mechanistic link is now, because that's pretty unclear. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you can kind of understand the mechanistic link between those two diseases or what's going on, then you can actually try and come up with some sort of interventions further down the road, so you can kind of prevent that transition from malaria into Burkitt's lymphoma. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I can see the huge implications this could have on society or societies where malarial parasites are quite rife. So I mean, it sounds awesome. Good luck with it. I hope you uncover something soon.
Yeah, we'll see.
The second section is called When You Were Young. And this section is all about your life, where you were from, and it goes all the way up through to pretty much where you are now. And I'd like to start by just asking you, where did you grow up, and where are you from?
Okay, yeah. So this is a really small section because I'm from London and I live in London. Essentially.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. What did you then study as an undergraduate? Did you stay in London as well to do your undergraduate?
I don't leave London. I'm the typical Londoner who does not go away. So no, I did my undergraduate in biochemistry, so I did a BSc in biochemistry at King's College London. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. And then, what did you study further after you graduated? Did you go straight from your BSc into a PhD, or did you go into an MRes, or what was your path?
Yeah, I guess my path is maybe a little bit less traditional, but yeah. So I finished my BSc in biochemistry a long time ago now, and essentially when I did my final year research project. I spent a lot of the time in the lab doing quite repetitive work, and it got me a little bit worried about whether or not I actually wanted to pursue research and lab work, because I said, while I enjoyed the part once I had my data and writing up the report, the actual physical lab work, I was just so unsure if that's what I was going to spend my life doing.
What sort of lab work were you doing at the time? Like Western blotting?
No, I was doing quantitative PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And, it sounded really good, but I spent time doing 384 well plates, essentially, with a single channel pipette. And setting them up.
Yeah, I do that still, to be honest. Like every now and then, I don't look forward to those days.
Yeah.
And if I had my entire project on it, I can imagine that would be.
Yeah, that was my entire project, essentially.
Oh no.
Just doing qPCR every single day. There were some fun bits, like every now and again we did one other technique, and because we were using human samples, I was able to go with some of the other researchers to the hospital and consent patients for tonsils. So that was the fun bit. But we'd get the sample, we'd go and consent them at about 7 a.m. in the morning, but we would get the sample whenever they turned up. But I didn't even get to do that fun bit. So I just did the final downstream part where you just did the qPCR. So yeah, I was a bit unsure about whether or not I wanted to do research. So at the time, before I did my undergraduate degree, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, in the summers, I worked as a street fundraiser. So I was essentially one of the people that came up to you and went, "Hey, I'm Faith. Have you thought about donating to Amnesty International?" for example. Yeah. So I was that person. And I went back to that job, essentially. So I decided to do that. And I was a fundraiser for maybe like a year and a half-ish kind of thing. And it was one of those things that I went from fundraiser on the street to team leader to then manager within this job that I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to progress in. And while it was fun and it was interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot, I was really kind of missing science.
So how long was this period? Sorry, was this just over a summer?
No. This was after university. So, so after I finished my undergraduate, I basically went for maybe like a year and a half as a fundraiser.
A year and a half? Oh, sorry, I don't know if I missed that before. Right, sorry, a year and a half.
Yeah, it was a long period of time. So I basically went from being a fundraiser to a team leader who was leading multiple fundraisers, and then to a manager where I was kind of working a bit more in the office and then kind of coordinating multiple teams. And you're thinking there going, okay, I'm progressing in this career that it's okay, but I'm really missing science. Like I started to realise I'm missing talking about science. I'm missing just hearing about new stuff that's going on. And I guess just using my brain a bit more. So then I basically took voluntary redundancy from that job. And then I started looking for a research assistant job, mostly because I'd spoken to someone on the street who was a scientist. That was a good thing about that job. You spoke to a lot of people. And they just kind of opened my mind to this idea, you could, even if you're unsure, do a research assistant job. You'll learn some more that way, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So I started to apply for research assistant jobs, but it was quite hard when you can imagine that the only experience you've had is 8 weeks in a lab a year and a half ago ish. It's tough. But then I basically ended up getting a research assistant job in the lab that I did my undergraduate project in. So the one that I was doing the qPCR and worried about. You're then straight back in that. So were you doing the same thing? No, it was completely different. It was really interesting the second time round. So that's good. Yeah, it was really cool. I emailed him basically saying, I will work for free. I just need some lab experience on my CV because it's really, really hard to get a research assistant job right now. And he mentioned to me that he probably had some funding coming up. So there was a potential that he could actually employ me. The power of network. I tell you. Yeah. So then
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, it's really
Okay.
powerful. So then I did that job for about.
So how long were you in that for?
I was there for a year as a research assistant for a year. And
Was this unpaid?
no,
for
this
the
was
full
paid.
year, by the way?
There's funding. It was a year. It was actually quite a good salary, so I was quite happy. It was quite like, yeah.
Good.
It's good.
I was going to say that's a long time to go.
No. He did me well.
Good.
Yeah, so I worked there for a year, and it was really cool because I was working on B cells, which I liked. I was working within the B cell, but I was doing a variety of different techniques, and we were looking at like how different molecules bound onto the immunoglobulin heavy chain locus, so the antibody locus. Yeah, it was a really interesting project, essentially. And I started talking to a lot of master's students and talking to a lot of PhD students about what they did. And I was like, you know what? I think I could do this. I would quite enjoy doing this, actually. And because the one thing I enjoyed about being a research assistant was the fact that you got to do lab work. But what I didn't enjoy was the fact that I did what I was told, essentially. I never got to plan anything or really make any massive decisions on the direction of the science that was going in. So I ended up applying for a master's and PhD program. So like a 1+3 program. And that was like a joint project with the MRC and Asthma UK. And that was split between King's and Imperial. And I ended up going to Imperial. So I did a master's in biomedical research with a focus on respiratory and cardiovascular science. And then I did my PhD. So a really long-winded
cool.
way.
Did I did the same. I did the same one. That's the scheme that I'm on, the 1+3. But it was we did the respiratory cardiovascular, the RCVS one, the RCVS stream, and then go on to your PhDs. So yeah, I mean, anyone who's listening, definitely they're really good courses. These 1+3s, you should definitely consider doing them. And I suppose I should ask you this question: why would you go for a 1+3 rather than just a 1? Why would you not just go and do a master's or go and do a PhD? I guess.
I say the thing with me, if you hear from my general chat, I'm the queen of indecision, which is why the 1+3 is fantastic. Because if you are not entirely sure whether or not you want to do a PhD and you just want to have a feeling of it, the 1+3 is great because you get a master's, but you get funded to do the master's. You get exposed to research. And depending on what program you're on, you might get exposed to research in 2 different labs or 3 different labs. So you get to try out a variety of different projects. So for me, for example, I knew I wanted to do immunology, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do cellular immunology with mice or if I wanted to do more molecular human immunology. And I was able to get exposed to both of those projects and then end up choosing cellular immunology. So I think it's a great opportunity to expose yourself to different types of science and also kind of decide if a PhD is for you. Yeah, that's my feeling.
Yeah. That's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so you did this 1+3, and then what was your PhD all about?
Yeah, so my PhD was looking at T follicular helper cells. So they're basically a type of T cell, which is really, really important for helping B cells, which are another cell of the immune system, to produce antibody. So T and B cells, they're both lymphocytes, so they're both types of white blood cells. And the T follicular helper cell is a type of helper cell, and the whole role of the helper cell is to help other cells do their roles. So what I was interested in was because the T follicular helper cell, like I said, is really important in helping cells produce antibody. But asthma is a disease almost of an irregular antibody response in a sense. So one of the hallmarks of asthma, and in particular allergic disease, which is what I worked on, is the fact that you would react incorrectly to a normally harmless agent, for example. So that could be house dust mite, for example. It could be animal dander, something like that. And instead of just ignoring it, your body is kind of reacting to it. And one of the ways it reacts is by producing IgE, which is a type of antibody. So it shouldn't be producing that. So what we were wondering is whether or not there was something wrong with the T follicular helper cell, for example, during allergic disease, that could also be playing a role in the production of this incorrect antibody, essentially. Yeah, so that's what my PhD was about. We were really trying to phenotype it.
Cool.
And the reason it was really cool was because the T follicular helper cell was quite new at that time. It was like, when there's new cool cells. Yeah. So I had started my PhD, I think, in 2013 or 2014 maybe. And this had just been defined as a new cell type in 2009. So, this is hot off the press science. So, yeah, that's what my PhD was essentially about.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah. Cool. So then, so you're now a postdoc at the Crick Institute, and did you transition straight from your PhD to this postdoc, or was there an intermediary step, or what happened, and also then how did you decide to make this step?
Yeah, actually, this was a very short period for me. So I finished my I left Imperial in I think November 2018, and I started my postdoc in January 2019. So I had a Christmas break, essentially. Nice. And then I started my postdoc. And
cool. Okay.
It was quite a short transition, yeah.
Well, did you consider any other careers after your PhD? Because a lot of people, when they're coming up to the end, think they don't know if it's a postdoc job that they want to do. They don't know if they want to go into industry. They don't know if they want to leave science altogether. So, what were the considerations that were going through your mind?
Oh man, I was thinking about pretty much everything, but the thing I was thinking, I think I was thinking about a lot of options, but I wasn't really taking any of them seriously, essentially, because I knew that I wanted to carry on doing research. But I'm kind of the person that wants to look at what my options are. So I looked at industry, I looked at like scientific writing and communication. But fundamentally, I knew that even if I wasn't sure I wanted to be a PI or a group leader or to lead my own research group, I knew that I wanted to try to do more research in a slightly different field. So I was pretty sure I didn't want to stay in asthma. That's why I was saying I was thinking about autoimmune disease. But I just knew that I wanted to carry on doing academic research, but in a slightly different disease. So I wasn't quite sure. I was pretty set on that. What I didn't know was whether or not once I started my postdoc, I would continue in academia necessarily for the long term.
I see. Yeah. And how do you feel about that now?
Now I know I will not be continuing in academia until the long run. But I'm still really, really enjoying my research. So, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Okay. So, to round off this section, I'd maybe just like your final pieces of advice for people. So people who are either entering into an undergraduate degree, a postgraduate degree, or looking for postdoctoral positions, what would your advice be to each of these different groups of people? What do you think that you really need to take into consideration when you're making these decisions?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the undergraduate to start off with. I think if you're making that switch from undergraduate to a PhD or a postdoc, or you're thinking about what to do next. And this is true for all stages, but it's just kind of keep your options open, look at multiple different careers that you're potentially interested in, and think about what you actually like about those and what you don't, potentially. But also, if there's something that you're interested in, like say it's a job that you're interested in going into, find someone's LinkedIn, message them, have a small chat. In the days of Zoom, it makes it even easier, but just talk to them of what that career is and what it's about. I think that's true for all stages, but I think at that undergraduate stage, it's really important. But also, don't underestimate yourself, I think, at that stage in particular. I think there's a lot of, no one will want to talk to me, I'm too junior, just don't underestimate yourself. Just, if there's a PhD position and you're interested in it, and you're thinking it's for you, just apply. The worst thing that's going to happen is no. Essentially.
Exactly. I'd maybe just like to throw in there as well. You mentioned it, LinkedIn, but also Twitter is a very good medium. Yeah. A lot of people, like if you can find people being a lot more active on their Twitters versus their LinkedIn. So it's always can hear about opportunities that way. So if you've not got a scientific Twitter account, I would strongly advise making one.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that actually, 100%. I think...
And then for a postgraduate?
Yeah, for postgraduate. And I think this is a point where the decision's slightly harder because it's... For a lot of people, it's that idea of if they didn't enjoy their PhD. The question is, okay, I didn't enjoy my PhD. What did I not like about it? If it's just simply you enjoyed the research, but you're not sure about it, you didn't have a good time in your group maybe that you were in, I'd say look at other bits of other places you can go, because it might just be your group that you didn't like rather than the actual research career. I'd just say, yeah, just keep your options open. And again, that similar advice of if there's something that you're interested in doing, just talk to someone that's doing that career, especially if you're thinking about not pursuing a research career. Is that idea of seeing what else is out there, because I think people underestimate what you can do with a PhD. They often feel like, well, I've wasted my time doing a PhD if I don't want to continue down the research track. It's like, no, actually, having a PhD is incredible in your CV. If you want to go into industry, it is great. If you want to go into scientific writing and you want to go into, I don't know, like medical communications or something like that, having a PhD on your CV actually helps as well. So that advice, don't underestimate what you can do. And there's lots and lots of places on the internet you can find advice, actually, because, I'm always looking about what else I can do. So there's lots of websites which just kind of list careers that you can do, and even just simple things like job titles, so you can know what job titles kind of relate to the same job. Yeah. Sorry, cool. I ramble quite a lot. I hope that helps.
Not at all. That's really sound advice. Anybody who's in any of those positions, really take it on board, particularly the reaching out to people, because sometimes just because an opportunity isn't advertised, it doesn't mean that it's not there. Sometimes just because someone's not said a particular thing, they can offer advice in different ways. Like you just don't know until you try. Unless you shoot your shot, you just don't know.
Yeah,
so
I agree. And actually that's really important, especially that's probably one of the most important points that I didn't mention, is that if you are a PhD student and you want to stay in research and there's a specific area or a specific lab that you're really interested in going into, you need to email them directly, have a small chat with them, and maybe you can apply for funding together to fund that position, or maybe they already have funding so that you can go to that lab. Yeah. So yeah. Definitely.
And then also, I guess, just following on from that, like, make sure you leave a lot of time, if, because it will take a while to get the funding through. So yeah, sound advice, but this is like something you can't just expect that is going to happen next month, right? Like it takes, 6 to 9 months or something to get the funding through or something like that.
If you're planning to do something like that, you want to be talking to them a year in advance. Start getting the feelings up. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Next section's all about your experiences in science. So I'd like to start by asking, what has been your most memorable experience in science?
Okay. Yeah.
The thing that sticks out most in your mind. What's I
was thinking about this and I thought, actually, I think it's got to be my first international talk at a conference.
Nice. Where was it?
Yeah, it was in Monterey in California, which was really exciting. I'd never been to California before. I was really excited to be there. But I think the reason it was pretty exciting for me and why it was probably the most memorable moment was it was a conference, but the conference was very specific. It was a conference on exactly what I worked on: T follicular helper cells and germinal center responses. It couldn't have been more specific.
Jeez, yeah.
So it was, it's quite a nervous place for your first international talk because literally everyone knows what you do. But what I found...
There's no black.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think the reason it stands out for me is because I remember just being like, why have they invited me to speak at this? I'm only in my second year of my PhD. Like, what have I got to offer these people? So I was really nervous about it. But actually, I went there. I gave this talk. It was really well received. And it was such a moment of growth for me that it was... Yeah, it was brilliant. I think the thing about it was because it was such a specific conference, I met so many people who were like the leaders in my field. So it was like, oh my gosh, have you seen Shane Crotty? He's over there. Like literally, it was that kind of like celebrities of science excitement. So I think for me, it was such an exciting moment, and I met so many other people, like PhD students from all around the world as well, and was able to talk to them. And like now I can see some of their names on papers, and I'm sitting there going, wow, look at this, look at us evolving. Yeah. It's really cool.
I mean, that's a really cool, that's that's a great advert for conferences, isn't it? And I suppose it wasn't something I was planning on discussing, but yeah, it's making me think now about like how much I've like missed the like going to conferences and sort of like meeting up and the experience of it all. Yeah, it's awesome. Like, so all of these people that you met, like, you know, these big scientists, did you go and like, you know, you said, oh, they're over there. Did you go and fangirl and say hi, or did you like?
No, not at that conference. I have to admit, not at that conference. I was not there. I was just happy to be there. But I have at other conferences now that I feel a bit more confident. I think you take it one step at a time. I was not there yet.
Yeah,
definitely.
No,
not.
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Cool. Yeah, and that's another good thing about being a scientist, I suppose. Many people won't know that, but yeah, you're often encouraged to go and present at domestic and international conferences, and you can get to go to really cool locations. Yeah, like for me, I've only been to one big real international conference in my PhD, but it was in Peru,
very cool.
and that was this time last year, just before coronavirus. So I feel incredibly lucky that I was able to get there, because obviously travel to Peru isn't going to be a thing now for, you know, years, I don't think. But yeah, like that, what an amazing experience. So yeah, international conferences. Be a scientist for international conferences. Yeah. Okay, cool. What was the biggest challenge that you faced as a student?
Yeah, I think this one was this is an interesting one for me, because I think for me it's probably quite personal what my biggest challenge was. So at some point during my PhD, I actually got quite ill. It was approached.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It wasn't like, it's not massive. I don't want to. It's not like, yeah, but like as in like for me, I got a little bit ill, so I lost quite a lot of weight, and then I was going back between like specialists and all this kind of stuff, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So for me, the biggest challenge was trying to kind of keep going with my PhD. And kind of trying to find the balance between like work and my health, and also trying to make sure I got a PhD at the end. Like, I'm making it sound more dramatic than it was, but at the time it was so stressful. It was just a lot.
I don't think you're being dramatic. I think it does sound very stressful. Don't be modest. I agree. Like that, you know, I mean, I'm hoping you're all better.
Oh yeah, I'm good.
Now.
I'm good.
Good.
It's one of those things. But at the time, and I think that's one of the things when you're doing a PhD, it's not that life just stops. You know, the process is so long; it can be 3-4 years, and you know, life is going to hit you with so many things as you're going along with that. So it's also about trying to think of how you're going to navigate that as well. For me, that was just, you know, talking to my supervisor and going, yeah, so there's some stuff going on here. Yeah, I'm not taking a step back, but I might be gone a bit more. And he was very fine with it. It was just like, you know, health comes first. And I was like, you know what, I agree. And that's the same with physical or mental health. You know, at the end of the day, you've got to look after yourself first. Yeah.
No, definitely. I totally agree. What was the best piece of advice that somebody ever gave you?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like during my whole process, I've been given so many different pieces of advice, but I feel like I've got like two. One of them is from a parent, and the other one is just from general people. So my mum, growing up, from as a point, she's always told me, don't be an NFA, which sounds like a weird thing to say. I'm pretty sure she made it up. It's someone with no future ambitions, essentially. So she's made it up, I'm pretty sure. So the whole way through my life, I've always thought, okay, don't be someone with no future ambitions. So I've always thinking, you know, as I'm navigating through my life, what am I going to next? What am I thinking about next? And it's always kind of thinking, yes, I'm living in now, but what am I doing next, and where am I going next? So that's a random parental bit of advice. But
no, that's a really good one. I don't think I've ever heard that.
I'm pretty sure she made it up. You would never have heard it anywhere.
Oh, she needs to trademark that and get it out there. Sell a book. It sounds good. It sounds awesome. Yeah. So, NFA. Okay. All right.
Don't be NFA. It's one of those things.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the second?
Yeah, the second one, actually, I think I've repeated it multiple times today, but it's just that idea of just saying yes to a lot of opportunities. So I think, if I take, for example, that international talk that I gave, I had to say yes to that. It would have been really easy for me to go, no, I'll take a poster presentation where I kind of stand at the side a little bit rather than give a conference talk in front of everyone. But obviously at some point I had to say, yes, I'll do that. And, you know, if you have a thing where someone's like, oh, can you help us with this little bit, this experiment? You say, Yes. Or can you present at this event that's happening on the side, or help us write this this article for this
Review
newspaper or something like that. But it's just that kind of thing of always kind of saying yes and taking opportunities that come up to you, because you never know where they're going to lead. Obviously, with anything like this, there's a balance, because you also need to learn when to say no. Yeah. That is also a very important skill.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Yeah, okay,
but
cool.
It's kind of that balance, knowing kind of when to say yes and when to say no. Because sometimes when we say no, we're just saying it because we're scared, we're worried, we've got this imposter syndrome, we're not sure that we're not something we can do. But we really should be only saying no to opportunities that they don't align with who we are, or our workload is so crazy that it's not worth it, that it's going to damage our work and life balance. Yeah. But yeah, that's my
I could not agree more. I think that's absolutely spot on. Definitely spot on. Then I know you're an early career researcher, but obviously you've still had a career. So what has been the hardest decision of your career so far?
Yeah, you know what, this one, I mean, I am still quite early in my career, but I think when I talked about earlier when I was a fundraiser and I took voluntary redundancy because I wanted to go back to science, that was probably a hard decision for me to make, actually, because I had a good salary. I was working, there was almost like no reason for me to leave, apart from the fact that I wanted to become a scientist. So I made that decision to take the voluntary redundancy, which meant that I didn't have a job that I was going into. And it meant that I was basically unemployed for about 5 months. So it was a tough time. I think often when we talk about our careers, we gloss over little things and be like, then I left this job and then I started here. But it was tough. And I think it's something that a lot of people experience. But at the same time, it was the best decision I ever made, because if I hadn't made that decision to leave my job at that point, I would probably still be a fundraiser here. Not necessarily within fundraising, like on the streets, but I might have followed the charity route and I might never have come back to science, and therefore I'd never be the position I am now. You never know. I might have come back to science in some way. But it was a hard decision at the time, but it was 100% worth it.
No, I mean, your desire has clearly shone through. Your desire has clearly shone through with that. So I think if you if you do what you love, then eventually all of the good things will follow. And obviously it's like your life, but I believe you made the right call there, definitely. So,
yeah, definitely. I think it was. But I think at the time it was like, no salary.
No, it's a really scary prospect, isn't it? It's a really scary prospect. Cool. Okay. Final thing to round out the section then. So it kind of leads on with what you were saying before about saying yes to the opportunities, or also like putting yourself out there, I suppose, for opportunities would be another thing. But do you feel like, in terms of like your work-life balance, what's your best advice in order to maintain a work-life balance? Like, do you, how do you balance everything with your studies and with, all of the other extracurricular things that you want to do to sort of like be an exceptional person?
Yeah, I say I'm not good at this. I'll start by saying that straight away. Like, work-life balance is something that I have struggled with for a really, really long time, because I'm kind of the person that wants to do everything. I'm like, if I'm going to be at work, I want to do work. And then if I'm outside of work, I'm like, if I'm socializing, why not socialize hard? I'm burning both sides of it.
Oh, I'm the exact same type of person, I totally understand. Understand. Yeah.
But I think it's just kind of, I think as I've moved on, I think it's about sticking with what's important. So I can think of instances during my PhD, for example, where I went the extra mile, but I gained nothing from it, essentially. So I'll use an example of, you're doing an experiment Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, did you need to go in on that Saturday? You don't always need to go in on that Saturday. And I would go in on that Saturday. I'd miss some sort of social occasion. The experiment didn't work. The experiment could have really easily waited until Monday. Do you know what I mean? It's like stuff like that. It's kind of putting all your energy in. Don't get me wrong, you have to work hard during a PhD. Don't get me wrong. But I think with anything, and it's the same with life, there's peaks and there's troughs. There's periods where you need to go hard, where it's so important that you have to put all those extra hours in. But there's also periods where, you know what, if it's quiet, chill and relax. Enjoy it, because it will go into a peak again, you know?
Yeah, it really will. The work is always going to be there.
It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And I've watched myself and I've watched other PhD students go hard, until they break. Yeah. It's not worth it. Like, burnout is real. It's honestly real. It happens. So I say for me, I think it's that work-life balance is kind of identifying what is important to you in all parts of your life. Like, what is a non-negotiable at work? What is a non-negotiable at home, for example? Have those things set out, and then everything else that's kind of more flexible, you can put them in when they need to be, but they don't need to happen all the time. I don't know if that's the best way of describing it, but like I said, it is something I struggle with as well, because I want to do everything. But I also have to realise that there are only 24 hours in a day, and I am only but human. Exactly. So, yeah.
No, that's really solid advice. Yeah, totally agree. Very final thing for this section, just wanted to add it on as well, is that a lot of scientists suffer with imposter syndrome. Is that something that you've ever encountered?
Oh, yeah. The queen of imposter syndrome. Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
How do I deal with it?
How do you deal with it?
I feel the fear and I do it anyway, is the best way of saying it. It's the only way.
Yeah. The fear makes you alive, you know.
It's the only way. Yeah. And I'm on a course at the moment, and it's a leadership course, and they're talking about this concept of, you know, comfort zone, fear zone, growth zone, and then, you know, established, essentially. So, you know, imposter syndrome is real. We all feel it. But at the same time, if you step out of your comfort zone just a little bit, yes, you will feel the fear. It will be hard and it will be tough, but you will grow from that and you will just expand your comfort zone, essentially. You will expand it. And I think the best example that I have of this is very recently is that, so I'm doing a project at the moment called Team Halo, which is all about getting people to kind of tackle the misinformation around the COVID-19 vaccines that are happening right now. And as part of that project, I was asked to do some TV interviews for Channel 5 and also another interview for Sky News. So my instinct was
awesome, by the way.
Absolutely not. That was my instinct straight away. The imposter was setting in going, what have I got to offer? I have nothing but a PhD in immunology. Like, come on. You know, so instantly I'm stepping back and going, no, this isn't for me. But then funny enough, it aligned with me on going on this course, and they were saying, you know, step out your comfort zone, then you grow your comfort zone. And I was like, I need to step out of my comfort zone. So then I did this interview. It didn't kill me, you know? I'm still standing. It did not kill me.
Exactly.
It's still standing.
And you're stronger for
and I'm
it,
stronger
right?
for
You're
it.
stronger for doing all these interviews.
Yeah. So that would be what I'd say, you know, feel the fear, do it anyway. And, you know, most of the times, even if it goes wrong and it goes awful and terrible, you've still learnt from it. You've gained... You've literally lost nothing most of the time. Yeah. Like most things that we do in our lives, they are not life and death decisions. So
that's true.
Yeah, it will be fine. That would be my advice.
No, that's really cool. I had a thought while you know, you mentioned about it was just the work-life balance thing, and I should have asked this before. Do you regret working at the weekends and trying to, like, you know, especially with COVID now, we're now not able to be in social situations. Do you regret it?
Yes and no. So I regret some of them. I don't regret them all, because I think okay. Yeah, I think at the beginning of my PhD I really struggled with learning new techniques. So I think I put a lot of time in at the weekends because of the fact that I just didn't get it. So I needed to put more time in to try and kind of balance that and give myself extra time to actually do it. So, for example, I use this analysis software, but I never found the time in Monday to Friday because I was doing experiments to actually get to grips with this. So I have found that the weekends kind of helped me do that. But at the same time, that learning could have still happened on Monday to Friday, realistically. So, I do regret it, but not entirely, because I feel like I did learn from being able to do that. But at the same time, the big experiments I regret, because, when I have the saying that if something's going to go wrong, it's going to happen on the weekend when no one's there to help you. That has been my experience.
Always, yeah.
And that has been my experience. So now I try not to do anything important on the weekends at all. And I try and limit my weekends entirely. Because otherwise it's really, really hard to have any sort of work-life balance if you have to come in on the weekends. So I try and keep my work to Monday to Friday, even if that means working really, really late on Monday to Friday. And I try and keep my weekends as free as possible. But yeah, like I said, I don't regret them all, but I do regret some of them, because it's not worth missing big occasions that, are never going to be repeated because you need to be in the lab.
It's so true. It doesn't feel like that at the time, though, does it? I think it's just the greater sense of perspective that you don't have, like, because you've got this tunnel vision that I need to do it. I've got to do it. Like, if I do that, then this will be really good. And it's very difficult to sometimes take that step backwards and then look at the broader perspective. It's something that I've certainly thought about.
I think it comes of age as well. It's not just I know people say that, but as well anyway. But, when I started my PhD, I was in my 20s, I had energy, essentially, as well. I had the energy to do those weekends and, life wasn't the same. It was very different. I had a lot less, like, I don't have commitments. I don't have kids or anything like that. But, like, I had less things that needed to be done. I had more freedom in my life, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And, but as you get older, you also realise, you know what? There is more to life than work, yes. And also, as you get older, there's more commitments as well that come as well. So you need to kind of segment that part of your life a bit more. Yeah. Long way saying it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The next section is all about your passions outside of science. So, what you mentioned about making sure that you keep your weekends for yourself, which I think is a very, very sensible thing to be doing. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do in those weekend times?
Yeah, I think I do. Out on the weekends, I like to kind of do a lot of hobbies. So I've recently got into cycling at the moment. So I'm your stereotypical lockdown cyclist now. So I bought myself a bike. Yeah. She's very pretty. She's called Janice. She's great.
Ooh, nice.
So we've been cycling around London together and exploring the city. So I do a lot of that. I'm also really into like baking and home brewing beer. So during lockdown, I started a baking and brewing blog. So now I bake and I brew and I post it on the internet and have a separate Instagram for it as well. I really enjoy doing this.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you want to give a shout out to like what's it called? Where can people find it?
Oh yeah, I guess so. It's called A Life of Faff. So it's a lifeoffaff.com. Because
how many F's is that? Two F's.
Yeah.
2 F's. Okay.
Yeah, and I just like post what I'm baking or the home brewing beer that I'm doing, which is really fun because it's kind of science, but at home. It's kind of really like similar.
Fun science.
Yeah. And the same with baking. Fundamentally, I'm always a scientist. I think even if I ever stop doing science, I'm still very meticulous. And it's the same kind of energy in those activities. So yeah, that's me.
So what's the most challenging thing you've baked then?
Oh, it's a good question. Oh, I guess I'm still quite junior in my baking journey, but I think the most challenging thing I've baked so far has been I made my mum a 60th birthday cake. So during lockdown,
That's a lot of responsibility, flipping it.
Well, the plan was, we had such big grands for my mum's 60th. We were going to hire a hall. We were going to invite loads of family members, not just from the UK, but from Nigeria, and surprise her. But, lockdown. So then it was like, we'll have 10 of us together in a house. Then it was like, nope. So now it was like, I'm going to walk to my parents' house and give my mum a cake at the door, and then I'm going to say hi and bye. So that's the levels that we had. So I baked like a free tier cake with like jam and cream, and then I iced it on the outside, like really professional looking. I was quite proud of me. Then did like a drip layer on it, and then designed the top with lots of chocolates and bits. But that's my most professional thing I've done.
Is it on the blog?
Not yet, actually. The blog, see, the thing with the blog, I enjoy the blog, but science likes to get in the way of the blog. So, you might notice that the last post on the blog was a month ago, but we're still trying.
Fair enough. And how about the beers? What is it that you're brewing?
So I've brewed, IPAs, I've done some pale ales, I've done, some stouts and some American pale ales. I'm trying all different styles and done some wheat beers. At the moment, I'm not brewing. I haven't got anything brewing right now, but hopefully planning to. Next time I'm brewing again, we're thinking a red rye IPA. Yeah.
Cool. How long did it take to do for the whole brewing process? I've never actually done it myself.
Yeah, it's about a month. So altogether, you have brew day where you get your grains, because we do it from scratch. So you get your grains and you kind of steep your grains to release all your sugars and stuff. And then you boil it, you add like hops, which kind of season it, and depending on the hop varieties you put on, it kind of determines the flavour. And obviously the grains that you use determine the style of beer that you're doing. You basically chuck on some yeast, and depending on the strain of the yeast that you have, depends the flavour and so forth. And then you leave it to ferment for about 2 weeks. And then after about 2 weeks, you transfer it into bottles, cap them up, and then leave them for an additional 2 weeks to bottle condition with a little bit of extra sugar, so that you can basically get some carbon dioxide released, and you can open them up in 2 weeks after that, and you have a nice, lovely beer, which get better over time. So 2 weeks is the minimum.
Well, I was just going to say, like, were they nice and lovely? Like, what was the result?
Yeah. You know what? They've been it's got better over time, but like at the beginning, it was. The first one was using a Wilkinson kit, like Wilco kit, and it was like syrup from a can, and that wasn't very good, I have to admit. But after switching to doing it properly from grains, it's been lovely ever since, and it just gets better as you get a bit more experience, I guess.
Nice. It's something that I've been considering, and I've not done it yet because I've put all my energy into making the podcast and doing all the editing and all of that. But it's definitely something I think I'd like to do at some point. So I might have to get your advice.
Yeah.
Or if you're posting it on your blog.
Yeah. It's the most science thing. Everyone I know who homebrews beer is a scientist. Honestly, it's just such a science thing to do. Honestly, get involved.
Okay. So, what are you a passionate advocate for?
Yeah, I guess outside of like the lab and outside of my kind of leisure time activities, I guess the thing that I'm most passionate about advocating for is like diversity in STEM. Science, tech, And I think the main place that I focus my energies is generally to do with racial diversity within STEM, because of the idea that if I take me as like a black person within science that I do, there's very, very few people that look like me within anywhere I've really worked. And particularly once you get past undergraduate level and you start looking at PhD students, there's very few people who are PhD students. And then when you look even further up, you can see that very few people make it to academic levels. And if you look at professors, I think something like out of 19,000 professors in the UK, I think there's about 100-ish that are black, so maybe 120-ish.
Really?
It's a really, really low figure.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
okay.
And when you look at black women, it's about 30. So it's really, really, really low. So I'm quite passionate about kind of advocating to change that within the UK structure.
Okay. So, I mean, how?
Yeah. So I do what I can, essentially. So so I do, for example, within where I work at the Crick, I'm part of the Prison Network, which is our racial equity network. And I've just recently become the co-chair of that, so we're doing what we can to change it within the Crick. We've also got the Race Equality Charter working group. So this is a charter that's very similar to Athena Swan, but it's focused on race. And although the Crick, where I work, is an institute, not a university, so they can't be awarded the actual award, we've got a group of people working together to try and see what we can do to change our institution. Outside of that, I do talks at universities or talks at universities to kind of promote racial diversity within STEM and get people talking about it. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. Apart from that, I'm on the BSI committee, so I'm part of the British Society of Immunology forum.
Okay.
What we're doing there is kind of like a think tank to try and see how we can shape immunology within the UK. So my part of that is I'm really trying to think of how we can bring racial diversity to UK immunology. So I'm kind of trying to broach it at different sides within the small scale of where I am, but also trying to do larger things elsewhere.
No, that's really cool. Okay. So within the BSI, like what more can you do other than the university talks that you're doing? What are your strategies?
Yeah, within the BSI is really interesting because on the BSI I'm part of the forum, and if you think of it as a structure, if you have the forum, which is kind of the think tank, then you have the trustees, which actually bring in policy. So what the BSI, because obviously it's a learners' society, it doesn't have a control over what universities can do necessarily. But what we're trying to do is think about what they can do. So in terms of get a shape of what is happening within UK immunology in terms of race, for example. If there's any way they can kind of direct funding to kind of fund those kind of policies. So for example, one thing that they're thinking about doing right now is an EDI fund, an EDI grant specifically funded from the BSI. And hopefully that will help fund projects that can specifically bring change to racial diversity if someone applied for that within the BSI. But these are all new things that are coming about. At the moment, they're in the process of changing their strategy. So hopefully some of the strategy changes will come from what we're saying within the forum as well.
Cool. Yeah. I wish you all the best with that. Yeah. I really. Yeah. It's always a bit like. Well, I don't know. For me, I never really think about this sort of stuff, and it's I recognize that I'm not someone who's had to think about it. So the more I've been exposed to people like yourself saying that there needs to be more diversity, it's really started to strike a chord with me. So I definitely I definitely really think that the work that you're doing, raising the awareness, getting the word out there is it's awesome. The last section's all about your final thoughts. So, what would your advice be to young people right now?
Yeah, with the pandemic,
tough climate.
Yeah,
exactly.
Gosh, with the pandemic, it does. You know what? I just think everyone is just being amazing right now. I say again with just reach out to people, especially now when it's so tough. So I think, especially with undergraduates, I'll use that as an example. It's a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to have lab experience because a lot of their practicals have been cancelled, and a lot of people didn't get third year research projects because of the fact that they weren't allowed in the lab. So I say the thing that you can do, and I've seen a lot of people doing, is applying for a lot of summer studentships, because some of them will be running in the coming months. So just try and get as much lab experience as you can, but also be aware that, yes, you don't have lab experience, but also a lot of people don't. So still apply for stuff, because the expectation is going to be less than it has been in previous years, obviously. Just bear that in mind, that you're not in a unique position. I'll just say, just reach out and try and get out get as much experience as you can, but again, don't let it stop informing. Oh, let me start that again. Don't let it stop you applying for anything. And I say that across the board. It's kind of, especially in times like this where the market is tough, just apply for as many opportunities as you can, because one of them will land. And to a certain extent, I do know what you feel. When I graduated in the midst of the credit crunch. So a long time ago. And I know how that feels. And there is it does come out the other way, essentially. It's not going to be bad forever, is what I'd say.
Yeah. How do you see the future of your field? I suppose when I say field, I mean immunology in general. What's the future? Obviously, we've got a lot of things like these amazing RNA vaccines and adjuvants that are coming out. But what is? I don't know. How do you see the future?
Yeah, I think the future of immunology, I actually think it's really bright, because I think with as sad as the pandemic has been, I think it's really opened people's eyes to the power of research, and in particular immunology. I feel like it's been one of those sciences that's been up and coming for such a long time, and now it's finally met its day. The world understands that we exist. I think the future of immunology in terms of research, I think it's the use of systems biology, that kind of big data. You're seeing that a lot within research anyway, but I think it's going to really kick off now, and we're going to use it for a lot of things. I kind of see that it's that multidisciplinary approach, kind of understanding that it doesn't take just immunologists to make it, but you need to kind of collaborate with lots of different people from lots of different areas of science to get your science across. So I think it's more collaborative. It's collaborative, it's big data, and it's that idea that immunology is here. Fund us, please.
Definitely. Cool. Okay, so which in science in general, which emerging trend do you see as having the greatest potential?
Oh, emerging trend.
God,
I don't have an answer to this.
No, that's all right. We had a few interesting answers. So on the podcast so far, some people have said things about CAR T, which is obviously very much in the immune field. Then some people have said about AI. Some people have mentioned sort of like the integration of technologies and stuff. So I
guess that's kind of
difficult.
It's hard, because that's kind of what I said in the previous example.
Yeah, exactly. But this is why I'm trying to sort of like open it up into not just your field, because obviously everyone knows about the greatest advances in their field, but maybe I suppose just a technology that you feel excited by, that you think has got awesome potential to do stuff.
Okay. I'm just gonna say, I'm not gonna dwell on it, because I haven't got a massive answer. I'm gonna say I think CRISPR is an amazing tool. And I think it's going to get used more and more in biology. And I think it's going to change how we do research more and more every day.
Definitely. So CRISPR is the gene editing technology, right? So obviously then that brings with it its whole host of issues in terms of like usage. How what is it, like ethics? I suppose is the umbrella that it falls under. I mean, I do agree, like the potential is there, but it's just, I mean, every technology gets abused, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, most definitely, 100%.
Yeah, but CRISPR is definitely crazy, and we will have a feature episode on CRISPR at some point soon.
Very
So
cool.
all about CRISPR discussion, so that should be so watch out for that, basically.
Very cool.
Okay, and then the very final question is, if you could do it all over again, what would you change and what would you keep the same?
Oh, okay. Yeah. If I could do it all over again, you know what? I don't think I would actually change much, because although there have been ups and there have been downs, I think largely I've been very happy with the way that my career has gone so far. You know, this could change in 10 years' time. But I think, it comes back to that thing that we talked about earlier. For me, I'd do it all the same, but I think I'd value my work and life balance a little bit more. That would be me,
No, I think that's a very, very fair answer. And I think that's really good thing to finish on, for everyone to ponder. So, Faith, thank you so much for giving up your time. Really, really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed being interviewed on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, actually. It's not often you get to talk about your journey in the same way.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Cool. So cheers, and thank you everybody for listening. And if Faith, you want to just give one final shout out for your blog?
Yeah, www.alifeoffath.com.
There we go. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.
Well, there we have it. The route to starting a PhD is not always a well-beaten path. Faith's story shows the power of networking and resilience, and she's now doing incredible work both in her postdoc and in her outreach activities. I'm so very grateful that she found the time to talk with me on the podcast and to share her advice. Please make sure to keep subscribing and following us on Twitter and on our YouTube platforms. Spread the word with your friends and family. Also, please rate us on your podcast platform, and this helps us out a huge deal. In 2 weeks' time, on Wednesday the 19th of May, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Mick Jones of Imperial College, where we're going to talk all about how synthetic molecules of DNA and RNA are made. So until then,